The desert wind howled like a wounded animal, whipping sand across the cracked asphalt of Route 17, where the sun dipped low and painted the horizon in blood-red streaks. In the shadow of a derelict gas station, its pumps long rusted and forgotten, a little girl no older than 7 huddled against the peeling wall. Her dress was torn at the hem, dirt smudged across her cheeks like war paint, and her small hands clutched a faded stuffed bear as if it were her only anchor. Tears carved clean paths through the grime on her face, and her sobs cut through the evening quiet, raw, terrified cries that spoke of something far worse than being lost. Faint bruises shadowed her arms, vestiges of a cruelty that no child should know, and she whispered to herself, "Daddy, please come back." Her voice breaking like fragile glass. The rumble started faint, then grew into a thunderous roar that shook the ground. Ethan Iron Harlan, a weathered biker in his late 40s, crested the rise on his customized Harley, the engine's growl a testament to years of road-worn loyalty. His leather vest, patched with the insignia of the Iron Promise crew, a forged chain linking rusted links, hung heavy on his broad shoulders, scarred from old battles he never spoke of. Ethan's face was a map of hard lines, eyes hidden behind aviator shades that reflected the dying light. But beneath the tough exterior lurked a man haunted by ghosts, a promise made in the smoke of a long-ago fire, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. He'd been riding solo for months, chasing horizons to outrun the ache of lost brothers and unspoken regrets, when the girl's cries pierced his helmet like a siren's call. He killed the engine with a flick of his wrist, the sudden silence amplifying her whimpers. Dismounting, boots crunching gravel, Ethan approached slowly, his shadow stretching long across the lot like a reluctant guardian. The girl flinched at first, curling tighter, but something in his steady gaze, perhaps the quiet strength that had seen him through desert storms and barroom brawls, eased her fear just enough. She looked up, eyes wide and searching, and without a word, she reached out a trembling hand. Her tiny fingers tapped his chest, right over the heart, where his own faded tattoo hid beneath the vest. A simple oath inked in youth, promise kept or die trying. "You're my real dad," she whispered, her voice so soft it barely stirred the air, but it hit Ethan like a sledgehammer. He turned pale, the color draining from his sun-leathered face as memories flooded back unbidden. A night 15 years ago, under a monsoon sky in a forgotten border town, a woman named Clara, with eyes like storm clouds, begging him to take their child and run. "If I don't make it, Ethan, promise me you'll find her one day. Be the father she needs." He'd walked away, convinced it was just desperate words from a life he couldn't save, burying the vow deep with his other scars. But now, this girl, Lily, her name tag red on the bear, stared at him with a recognition that twisted his gut. Was it coincidence, or had fate finally caught up? If you're hooked on this tale of forgotten promises and unbreakable bonds, smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We've got 6 more chapters of redemption riding your way. Ethan knelt to her level, the scent of hot metal and exhaust clinging to him like a second skin. "Hey, kiddo," he said, his voice gravelly but gentle, the kind honed from consoling fallen comrades. "What's your name? How'd you end up out here alone?" Lily hesitated, wiping her nose with the back of her hand, then spilled it in halting bursts. Her mom had vanished 2 days ago, taken by bad men in shiny cars who came to their trailer park demanding money they didn't have. The girl had hidden, but when she emerged, the place was ransacked, signs of a struggle everywhere. Overturned furniture, shattered glass glinting like accusations in the dust. She'd run until her legs gave out, ending up here praying for rescue. Ethan's jaw tightened, a familiar fire igniting in his chest. He'd seen this before, shadows of corruption creeping into quiet lives, preying on the vulnerable. His Iron Promise brothers, veterans like him, bound by oaths forged in war and loss, had ridden against such darkness before, not with guns blazing, but with the unyielding force of truth and loyalty. But this felt personal, a thread pulling at the edges of his buried past. He glanced at the horizon, where the first stars pierced the twilight, and made a silent vow. He'd get her safe, uncover what happened to Clara's echo in this child, and honor the promise he'd let fade. Scooping Lily up gently, her weight light as a feather against his frame, Ethan settled her on the Harley behind him, wrapping her in his spare jacket. The engine roared back to life, a beast awakening, and they peeled out onto the open road, the gas station shrinking in the rear view like a bad dream. Dust billowed in their wake, the cool night air rushing past, carrying whispers of gasoline and freedom. Lily clung to him, her small arms around his waist, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt the weight of purpose settle, not as a burden but as a beacon. Miles blurred into the gathering dark, the bike's headlights cutting through the void like twin swords. Ethan's mind raced ahead. The nearest safe haven was Blackridge, a dusty town where his crew's old safe house still stood, guarded by men who'd die for a brother's word. But doubts gnawed. Could this really be Clara's daughter? The resemblance was there in the curve of her chin, the stubborn set of her jaw, but proof was a ghost. And those bad men, they sounded like the remnants of the Viper Syndicate, a corrupt network he'd tangled with in his younger days, buying off sheriffs and silencing witnesses with cold efficiency. As the lights of Blackridge flickered into view, a neon sign for the Rusty Spur Saloon glowing like a false promise, Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket, a burner, reserved for emergencies. He pulled over on the outskirts, the engine idling low. The call was from Jax, his second-in-command, voice crackling with urgency. "Iron, you won't believe this. Word spreading about a missing woman up north, Clara Ruiz, matches your old flame. And get this, her kid's photo is circulating. You seeing what I'm seeing?" Ethan's grip tightened on the handlebars, Lily's whisper echoing in his ears. The past wasn't buried. It was riding shotgun, demanding reckoning. He hung up, revving the throttle. Whatever shadows loomed, he'd face them. Not alone, but with the family he'd chosen, the Iron Promise unbreakable. The road ahead stretched infinite, but for the first time, Ethan didn't fear the dawn. It promised justice, raw and real, born from a tap on the chest and a child's unyielding faith. The neon haze of Blackridge enveloped them, like a faded memory. The town's single main street, lined with weathered storefronts, and the occasional flicker of porch lights fighting the encroaching night. Ethan's Harley purred to a stop outside the Rusty Spur Saloon, its engine's dying rumble echoing off the clapboard walls like a sigh of relief. Dust settled around them in lazy swirls, carrying the faint tang of stale beer and sun-baked earth. Lily stirred against his back, her small frame warm and trusting, the stuffed bear peeking from her lap like a silent sentinel. He killed the ignition fully now, the sudden quiet amplifying the distant hum of crickets and the low murmur of voices spilling from the saloon's swinging doors. Ethan dismounted first, his boots hitting the gravel with a solid thud that grounded him amid the whirlwind in his mind. He reached back, lifting Lily down with the care of handling fragile cargo, her eyes wide as she took in the unfamiliar glow. "This place is safe, kiddo," he murmured, his voice a low anchor in the dark. "Folks here look out for their own." But even as he said it, doubt flickered. Blackridge wasn't the fortress it once was, not with whispers of the Viper Syndicate's tendrils reaching even this far into the Badlands. He scanned the shadows, the glint of his aviators catching the salon's red sign, before guiding her inside, one hand protective on her shoulder. The air inside hit like a wall, thick with the scent of polished wood, spilled whiskey, and the underlying musk of leather from the few patrons nursing drinks at scarred tables. Heads turned as they entered, the jukebox crooning a slow blues tune that spoke of lost roads and second chances. Behind the bar stood Maria, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, with silver streaks in her dark hair, who'd patched up more than a few iron promise riders over the years. Her gaze softened at the sight of Lily, and she slid a glass of water across without a word, the ice clinking like chimes. "Sit," Ethan said, settling Lily on a stool and pulling up beside her. He leaned in close, the worn patches on his vest brushing the counter. "Tell me more about those men. What'd they look like? Anything stand out?" Lily sipped the water, her fingers tracing the bear's frayed ear, then spoke in a rush, her words tumbling like pebbles down a slope. "Shiny black cars," she said, with men in crisp suits that didn't fit the dust. Tall, one with a scar across his cheek like a lightning bolt, barking orders about debts unpaid. Her mom had argued, fierce and unyielding, before they dragged her away. Lily had hidden in the closet, heart pounding like thunder, until the silence after the chaos drove her to run. Ethan's fist clenched under the bar, knuckles whitening against the dark wood. Debts, Clara's old life catching up, perhaps the gambling dens she'd fled years ago, or worse, the viper's grip on small-town loans that crushed the weak. He'd known their type. Not street thugs, but polished predators who hid behind badges and briefcases, corrupting everything they touched. A surge of old anger rose, tempered by the moral code that had kept him alive, the promise not to strike first, but to stand firm when the innocent called. "You did good staying hidden," he told Lily, his tone steady as a heartbeat. "Brave like like a fighter." Maria hovered nearby, wiping a glass with deliberate slowness, her eyes flicking between them. "Heard the radio chatter earlier," she said quietly, voice laced with the gravel of too many late nights. "Missing woman from the trailer park outskirts. Cops are dragging their feet. Say it's a runaway case, but folks talk. Syndicate's been sniffing around, pressuring for protection money." Ethan nodded, the pieces slotting into place like gears in a well-oiled machine. Clara Ruiz, the name Jax had dropped, burned now. A link to that rain-soaked night when she'd pressed a locket into his hand, whispering of a child on the way and enemies closing in. He'd left, chasing his own demons, convincing himself the promise was a fever dream. But Lily's face, the way her eyes held that same stormy depth, it clawed at him, demanding truth. His phone buzzed again, insistent against his thigh. Stepping outside for privacy, the cool night air nipped at his skin, stars wheeling overhead like distant witnesses. Jax's voice crackled through, urgent but controlled. "Iron, we're mobilizing. Got 20 brothers en route from the ridge, more if you give the word. That photo of the girl, spitting image of you, a man. Clara reached out to me years back before she went dark, said if anything happened, find you. The oath holds." Ethan's breath caught, the weight of brotherhood settling like an old friend's hand on his shoulder. The iron promise wasn't just ink and leather, it was this. Veterans who'd shared foxholes and funerals, choosing loyalty over blood, redemption over revenge. "Bring 'em," Ethan replied, glancing back through the door at Lily, who watched him with quiet hope. "But smart. No guns, no glory. We find the truth first, expose the rot. For her." The line went dead, but the conviction lingered, a fire kindled in the dark. He pocketed the phone and re-entered, the saloon's warmth wrapping around him like resolve. Lily looked up, her small hand reaching for his. "Are you going to save Mommy?" she asked, voice threading the air with fragile trust. Ethan knelt again, meeting her gaze level. "Yeah, kid, that's the promise." The words hung there, simple and profound, echoing the vow he'd buried, but never broken. Outside, the first bikes crested the horizon, headlights piercing the night like promises fulfilled, engines growling in unison. A convoy of shadows riding for justice. The rusty spur's door swung open to admit them, leather and determination filling the space, as words spread in hushed tones. Iron was calling the ride. But as the crew gathered, maps unrolled on the bar amid clinking glasses and murmured plans. A shadow stirred at the edge of town. A sleek black sedan idled on the outskirts, its driver watching through tinted glass, a scarred cheek catching the dash light. The Vipers knew a ripple when they felt one, a lone biker with a child, stirring old ghosts. The net was tightening, but Ethan felt it only as a distant hum. His focus on the girl beside him, the family forming in the flickering light. Dawn crept closer, painting the sky in hesitant greys, whispering of reckonings yet to come. And now I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The first rays of dawn sliced through the saloon's grimy windows like hesitant fingers, casting long shadows across the scarred oak tables where the Iron Promise crew had gathered. The air hung heavy with the aroma of strong coffee brewing behind the bar and the faint, acrid bite of engine oil clinging to the riders' jackets. Ethan stood at the head of the group, his broad frame silhouetted against the light, maps spread out before him like battle plans from forgotten wars. Lily sat perched on a stool nearby, her small legs swinging idly, the stuffed bear now tucked under her arm as she watched the men with wide-eyed curiosity. The rumble of arriving bikes had faded into a low murmur of voices, gruff exchanges laced with the quiet resolve of brothers who'd stared down worse than this. Jax, a stocky veteran with a salt-and-pepper beard and eyes sharp as switchblades, leaned over the map, his finger tracing a jagged line from Blackridge to the trailer park outskirts. Syndicates holed up in that old mill by the river, prime spot for their dirty deals. Word is, they've got eyes on every road in or out. If Clara's there, it's not a social call. The crew nodded, a ripple of leather creaking like old leather hinges, faces etched with the same scars Ethan carried. Reminders of oaths sworn in foxholes and hospital beds, where blood ties meant nothing and chosen family meant everything. There were 20 of them now, mechanics and ex-soldiers turned guardians of the forgotten, their vests bearing the forged chain emblem that symbolized unbreakable links. Ethan's gaze drifted to Lily, her presence a quiet anchor amid the tension. The night had been long, filled with her halting stories and his own unearthed memories, Clara's laugh echoing in rain-slicked alleys, the weight of her hand in his as she spoke of a future they both knew was slipping away. He'd promised to protect what was his, but life had pulled him onto endless roads, burying the vow under layers of regret. Now, with Lily's whisper still ringing in his ears, that promise clawed its way back, demanding he make it right. "We ride smart," he said, his voice cutting through the din like a steady engine hum. "No charging in blind. We scout, we gather proof, expose their game to the light. Justice ain't about fists, it's about truth holding up when everything else crumbles." Maria slid plates of eggs and toast across the bar, her movements efficient, a mother's instinct masking the worry in her furrowed brow. "You boys watch yourselves," she muttered, glancing at Lily. "That girl's seen enough shadows." The child looked up, offering a small smile that pierced the room's grit, her trust in Ethan a fragile thread weaving through the group. One rider, a lanky man named Tyler with tattoos snaking up his arms like rivers of ink, knelt beside her. "Hey, Squirt, ever ridden with the pack before?" Lily shook her head, but her eyes sparkled with tentative excitement. "Uncle Iron says you're all like knights," she replied, her voice soft but clear, drawing chuckles that eased the knot in Ethan's chest. As the crew plotted routes, back roads to avoid patrols, safe drops for Lily, the door creaked open again, admitting a gust of cool morning air laced with dew-kissed dust. It was Samuel, the oldest among them, a grizzled medic who'd patched Ethan's wounds in a desert skirmish years back. His arrival brought news that tightened every jaw. A tip from a contact in the next town over. Clara had been spotted alive but held against her will. Whispers of unpaid debts masking something deeper, a syndicate scheme to launder money through fake charities, preying on families like hers. "They're corrupt to the core," Samuel growled, settling into a chair with a weary sigh. "Bought off the local watch, turning blind eyes to the hurt they cause. But we've got leverage, old photos, ledgers from that border bust Ethan pulled off back in the day. Enough to shine a light and watch 'em scatter." Ethan absorbed it all, the pieces fitting like a puzzle he'd long avoided. The Viper Syndicate wasn't just thieves. They were a poison, seeping into the veins of quiet communities, eroding trust with every shakedown. His own past tangled in it. Clara had run from their grasp once, pulling him into the fray before he rode away, convinced solitude was his penance. But Lily's face, so achingly familiar, shattered that illusion. She was the living echo of that promise, a call to redemption he couldn't ignore. He stepped outside for a moment, the porch boards groaning under his weight, the horizon stretching vast and unforgiving. The sun climbed higher, gilding the scrub brush in golden hues, but the air hummed with unseen threats, a distant engine whine, perhaps, or just the wind playing tricks. Back inside, the planning shifted to action. Jax rolled up the map, his eyes meeting Ethan's in silent understanding. "We split, half ride with you to the mill, the rest circle back to the trailer park, secure any evidence. Lily stays here with Maria. A safest bet." Ethan nodded, but hesitation flickered as he looked at the girl. She slid off the stool, padding over to him, her hand slipping into his calloused one. "Don't let the bad men win," she whispered, her words carrying the weight of innocence unscarred by doubt. He squeezed her fingers gently, the warmth chasing away the chill of old ghosts. "They won't, kid. Not on our watch." The crew mounted up outside, engines coughing to life in a symphony of growls and pops, exhaust fumes mingling with the scent of awakening earth. Ethan lingered a beat longer, watching Lily wave from the saloon steps, her bear clutched tight. The ride out was a blur of dust clouds and whipping wind, the pack thundering toward the river like a force of nature, unchained. But as they crested a rise, a glint caught Ethan's eye, a black sedan lurking on a side trail, its occupant vanishing into the brush. The Vipers were closing in, their shadow lengthening with the dawn. Tension coiled in his gut, not fear, but the sharp edge of moral clarity. This wasn't just about saving Clara, it was about honoring the family forged in fire, proving that promises, once tapped into life, could shatter corruption like glass under a boot. Miles later, the mill loomed, a skeletal structure of rusted beams and crumbling brick. The river's murmur a deceptive lullaby beneath it. The bikes idled low as the riders dismounted, fanning out with the precision of men who'd danced this edge before. Ethan led the way, his steps measured, senses alive to every creak and rustle. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the must of decay and something sharper, fear perhaps, or the faint trace of desperation. They moved like ghosts through the dim corridors, flashlights cutting beams through the gloom, until a muffled voice echoed from the depths, Clara's, defiant and unbroken. The reckoning had begun, not with thunder, but with the quiet resolve of truths, long buried rising to claim their due. The dim corridors of the old mill stretched like veins in a dying beast, the air thick with the rot of forgotten industry and the metallic tang of rust flaking from exposed beams. Ethan's boots echoed softly against the cracked concrete floor, each step a measured pulse in the symphony of shadows. His flashlight beams sliced through the murk, revealing cobweb-draped machinery and scattered debris, empty crates that could hide a threat, puddles reflecting fractured light like shattered mirrors. Behind him, Jax and Tyler flanked close, their breaths steady but alert, the weight of their unspoken oaths hanging heavier than the dust motes dancing in the air. Samuel brought up the rear, his medic's kit slung low, a reminder that this ride was about mending breaks, not making them. The muffled voice grew clearer as they pressed deeper, Clara's tone laced with defiance that cut through the gloom like a blade. "You think threats will make me sign? I've stared down worse than you suits." A low chuckle followed, oily and confident. From a voice Ethan recognized from old whispers, the scarred man Lily had described, his words dripping with the false polish of corruption. The Vipers weren't just enforcers, they were architects of quiet ruin, twisting debts into chains that bound the desperate. Ethan's hand hovered near his belt, not for a weapon, but for the small recorder Jax had slipped him earlier. A tool for truth, not vengeance. The iron promise code burned in his veins. Expose the darkness, let justice flow from light, not blood. They rounded a corner into a cavernous chamber where the river's rush seeped through cracked walls, a constant undercurrent, like fate's relentless pull. There, in the half-light filtering from a high broken window, Clara stood bound to a rusted pillar. Her wrists chafed, but her chin lifted high. Her dark hair fell in tangles, framing a face etched with exhaustion, yet unbowed, eyes that once held storm clouds, now flashing with the fire of survival. Two men loomed nearby, the scarred one in a crisp suit that clashed with the decay, his cheek a jagged reminder of some long-ago brawl, and a burly accomplice fiddling with a ledger, numbers blurring lines between extortion and empire. Ethan's heart seized, the sight yanking him back 15 years to that border town downpour, Clara's hand in his, her whisper of a child sealing a promise he'd fled. She was the ghost he'd outrun, now flesh and fury, and Lily's face was her echo undeniable. He stepped forward, the beam of his light pinning the scene, voices halting mid-sentence. "Let her go," he said, his gravelly timbre echoing off the walls, steady as an engine at idle. The scarred man spun, hand twitching toward his jacket, but Jax's low growl from the shadows, "Easy now," froze him. No guns drawn, just the weight of numbers and moral ground, the crew emerging like spectres from the dark. Clara's eyes widened, recognition dawning slow. A flicker of shock giving way to something deeper. Betrayal. Relief. "Ethan," she breathed, the name a lifeline tossed across the years. The scarred man sneered, stepping between them, his voice smooth as poisoned silk. "This ain't your business, biker. Ruiz owes the house. Big. Walk away or join her." But Ethan held firm, the recorder humming faintly in his pocket, capturing every threat, every admission of protection fees that masked syndicate greed. He'd seen their game before, preying on widows and workers, buying silence from crooked officials, eroding communities one shakedown at a time. This wasn't debt. It was a web of corruption, and Clara had tangled in it, trying to shield her daughter from the same fate that had claimed her own kin. Jax moved subtly, circling to flank. While Tyler's eyes scanned for exits, the river's murmur swelling like an audience holding its breath. "We've got records," Ethan pressed, his voice calm but edged with the steel of conviction. "Your ledgers, your threats, it's all coming out. The law might be blind, but truth sees clear." The scarred man's facade cracked, a vein pulsing at his temple as he glanced at his partner, who shifted uneasily. Clara tugged at her bonds, urgency sharpening her gaze. "They took Lily, too. Said they'd use her to make me fold. But she ran, didn't she? Tell me she's safe." The words hit Ethan like gravel under tires, confirmation twisting the knife. Lily was theirs, his, by promise if not blood, the living thread of that monsoon night. He nodded, the motion small but loaded. "She's safe. Waiting for you." The scarred man lunged then, not with fists but desperation, shoving Clara aside to grab for the ledger. Chaos erupted in close quarters, A scuffle of grunts and shoves, the crew intervening with grapples and holds, not strikes, but restraints born of disciplined restraint. Ethan pinned the leader against a beam, the man's scar twisting in the light, breath hot with fear. "It's over," Ethan growled, recorder held up like evidence incarnate. "Your house of cards falls today, no more hiding behind debts and badges." As the dust settled, Clara freed by Samuel's quick hands, the chamber filled with the ragged cadence of release. She collapsed against Ethan, not in weakness, but reckoning, her hand finding his arm where the old tattoo hid. "You came back," she whispered, tears carving paths through the grime, the weight of years dissolving in the admission. He'd broken no bones, spilled no blood, but the victory hummed deeper. A moral triumph, loyalty redeeming the past. The Vipers subdued, zip-tied for the ride to town, their empire's underbelly exposed for the world to see. Jax radioed ahead to a trusted contact, a sheriff untouched by rot, who'd ensure real justice, not the syndicate's version. Outside, the sun crested fully, bathing the mill in unforgiving gold, the river sparkling like absolution. The crew mounted up, Clara riding pillion with Ethan, her presence a bridge to the family waiting in Blackridge. Engines roared to life, a thunderous chorus carrying them from the shadows, dust trailing like shed sins. But as they rolled out, Ethan's thoughts turned inward, the promise fulfilled, not erasing scars, but mending them into something stronger. Lily's whisper, Clara's gaze. They wove the iron promise tighter, a chosen kin forged in quiet courage. The road ahead promised more trials, syndicate remnants surely stirring, but for now, the dawn rode with them, justice a steady hum beneath the wheels. The return to Blackridge unfolded under a sky vast and blue, the wind whispering secrets through the scrub as the convoy cut through the Badlands. Lily's reunion with her mother waited at the saloon, a moment of light piercing the long night, but Ethan knew the shadows lingered. Corruption's roots ran deep, demanding vigilance. Yet in that ride, with brothers at his side and truth as his shield, he felt the weight lift, honor's legacy etched, not in ink, but in the lives reclaimed. If this chapter stirred something in you, hit that like button. It helps these stories of redemption reach more roads. The sun hung high over Blackridge by the time the convoy rolled back into town, its relentless glare turning the main street into a ribbon of shimmering heat. Dust devils swirled in their wake, kicked up by the Harley's tires, carrying the faint, acrid scent of exhaust and river mud that clung to everyone's clothes like a badge of the morning's trial. Ethan's bike led the pack, Clara's arms wrapped tight around his waist, her breath steady against his back, a rhythm that synced with the engine's low growl, grounding him amid the rush of reclaimed time. The mill's shadows faded behind them, but the weight of what they'd uncovered lingered. Ledgers stuffed in Jax's saddlebag, voices captured on recorder, proof that the Viper Syndicate's grip was more than rumor, a cancer feeding on fear and forgotten debts. As they pulled up to the Rusty Spur saloon, the engine's rumble died into expectant silence, the building's faded sign creaking in the breeze like an old man's sigh. Maria stood on the porch, arms crossed, her sharp eyes scanning the group before softening at the sight of Clara dismounting. Lily burst through the door a second later, the stuffed bear flying from her grasp as she sprinted down the steps, bare feet slapping the gravel. "Mommy!" The cry sliced the air, raw and joyous, drawing every head from inside, patrons pausing mid-sip, the jukebox's tune fading into irrelevance. Clara dropped to her knees, arms opening wide, and Lily crashed into her embrace, the two of them collapsing in a tangle of limbs and tears, the world narrowing to that single, unbreakable bond. Ethan watched from a distance, leaning against his bike, the metal warm under his palms. The scene blurred slightly in his vision, not from dust, but from the ache of years unlived, the promise he'd buried now blooming in full, vivid color. Clara's hair, tangled and wild, caught the light as she rocked Lily. whispering assurances that chased away the night's horrors. "I'm here, baby. We're safe now." But safe was a fragile word in these parts, and Ethan knew it. The reunion was a balm, yes, but the syndicate's remnants wouldn't vanish with one raid. They'd slither back, probing for weakness. His crew dismounted around him, Jax clapping a hand on his shoulder, the gesture solid as forged steel. "You did good, Iron. That's family right there, blood or not." Inside the saloon, the air shifted from tension to tentative warmth, sunlight slanting through the windows to gild the worn tables. Maria bustled about, pouring coffee laced with a splash of something stronger. Her movements, a quiet symphony of care. The crew settled in, voices low as they pored over the evidence. Samuel sketching out contacts who could push the recordings to honest ears, reporters in the next county over, untouched by the corruption that bought off so many. Tyler kept watch at the door, his lanky frame silhouetted against the glare, ever the sentinel. Clara sat with Lily curled in her lap, the girl's head on her shoulder. But her eyes, those stormy depths so like her mother's, kept drifting to Ethan, searching, questioning. He pulled up a stool across from them, the wood groaning under his weight, and for a moment words failed. The locket Clara had given him all those years ago hung heavy in his pocket now, retrieved from his saddlebag during the ride. He slid it across the table, the silver chain whispering against the scarred surface. "You kept it," Clara said softly, her fingers tracing the engraved initial L for Lily, etched in haste under that monsoon sky. Her voice carried the weight of accusation and gratitude, a mirror to the scars on his own heart. "I thought you'd forgotten, rode off and left us to the ghosts." Ethan's jaw tightened, the taste of regret bitter as black coffee. "I tried to outrun it. The road's good for burying things, but not promises. Not when they tap you on the chest and call you back." Lily stirred, lifting her head, her small hand reaching out to touch his arm. The same tentative tap from the gas station, now bold with certainty. "You are my dad," she murmured, not a question this time, but a truth claimed. Clara's gaze met his, the storm clouds clearing to reveal understanding, the pieces of their fractured past slotting into place. No blood test needed. The resemblance ran deeper than bone, woven from shared silences and unspoken loyalties. But peace was fleeting. Jax's phone buzzed sharply, cutting through the murmurs like a warning shot. He stepped aside, his face hardening as he listened, then waved Ethan over. Trouble brewing. That scarred bastard we tied up. His crew's already lawyered up, spinning tales of misunderstanding. And word's out. Syndicate's putting heat on the sheriff we called. Says we're vigilantes, tampering with official business. Ethan's fist clenched, the moral fire reigniting. The Vipers played dirty, always had, twisting justice into their tool, corrupting badges to shield their empire of extortion. It wasn't just about Clara and Lily anymore. It was a stand against the rot that let monsters hide in plain sight, preying on the vulnerable while the world looked away. Clara overheard her hold on Lily tightening. "They won't stop, not until they bury this." But Ethan shook his head, resolve etching deeper lines into his face. "They won't. We've got the truth on our side, your word, the recordings, the crew's eyes as witnesses. Iron promise doesn't break. We bend the dark toward light." He glanced at the group, brothers nodding in quiet accord, their vests a tapestry of shared battles. This was redemption's edge, not erasing the past, but forging it into armor for the family chosen, the one that rode through storms unbroken. Outside, the afternoon heat baked the street, but a distant rumble stirred. More bikes on the horizon, reinforcements called by Jax's network, veterans answering the oath without question. Lily slipped from her mother's lap, padding to Ethan's side, her hand finding his. "We ride together now?" she asked. Voice small but steady. He knelt, the scent of her, faint soap and dust, mingling with the saloon's warmth. "Yeah, kid. All the way." Clara joined them, her presence completing the circle, a silent vow exchanged in glances. The syndicate's shadow loomed, but in that moment under Blackridge's unyielding sun, honor's legacy pulsed stronger, a promise kept, lives intertwined, justice rolling forward like thunder on the open road. As the additional riders pulled up, engines harmonizing in a chorus of defiance, Ethan felt the shift, from lone wanderer to pillar of something greater. The evidence would be delivered soon, truths unleashed to unravel the web, but deeper still was the mending, the quiet courage of standing firm, family woven from loss and loyalty. The day stretched ahead, fraught with trials, yet laced with the unbreakable thread of redemption, pulling them toward whatever dawn awaited. The afternoon sun beat down on Blackridge like a relentless interrogator, turning the saloon's porch into a stage of stark shadows and glaring highlights. Ethan paced the creaking boards, the wood warm and splintered under his boots, each step echoing the churn in his gut. Inside, the air hummed with low voices and the clatter of coffee mugs, but out here the world felt exposed, vast sky pressing down, distant hills watching like silent judges. Lily's laughter filtered through the screen door, a bright counterpoint to the tension coiling tighter, her reunion with Clara still fresh, a fragile bloom in the dust. Yet the phone call from Jax lingered, a serpent's hiss. The syndicate's lawyers circling, painting the iron promise as outlaws, twisting rescue into crime. Corruption's hand reached long, buying whispers and warrants, threatening to drag the truth into the mud. Clara stepped out, wiping her hands on a dish towel Maria had pressed into her grip, her eyes shadowed but steady. The locket dangled from her neck now, catching the light like a talisman against the gathering storm. "She's asking about you," she said, voice soft as wind through dry grass, leaning against the railing beside him. "Wants to know if the nights ride forever." Ethan stopped pacing, his broad shoulders slumping just a fraction. The scent of her, faint wildflowers mixed with river damp, stirring memories he'd armored against. 15 years of roads and regrets, and here she was, not a ghost but flesh, demanding he face the man he'd become. "Nights break sometimes," he replied, gaze fixed on the horizon where more bikes idled in the lot, reinforcements forming a leather-clad phalanx. "But promises? They hold the line." Jax emerged next, ledger tucked under his arm like contraband, his beard flecked with coffee grounds from the hurried briefing inside. Tyler and Samuel flanked him, faces set in the quiet determination of men who'd traded foxholes for these badland battles. "Sheriff's on the fence," Jax reported, voice gravel over steel. "Syndicate's got him spooked. Threats to his pension, his kids' school. Says we hand over the evidence voluntarily, or he comes with badges blazing." The words hung heavy, the air thickening with the moral quagmire Ethan knew too well. Authority corrupted not by force, but by the slow drip of compromise, turning guardians into gatekeepers for the guilty. The Vipers thrived on it, their web of debts and deals ensnaring not just Clara's life, but the soul of places like Blackridge, quiet towns hollowed out by fear. Ethan's fist tightened on the railing, wood groaning in protest, but he exhaled slow, the creed of the iron promise anchoring him. No rash charges, no cycles of vengeance. Justice came through unyielding truth, loyalty's quiet power eroding lies like wind on stone. "We don't hand it over, not to him." He turned to the crew, eyes meeting each in turn, the salt and pepper resolve in Jax's stare, Tyler's wiry vigilance, Samuel's weary wisdom etched from patching wounds in forgotten wars. They were his chosen blood, forged not in birth, but in shared silences, oaths inked deeper than skin. "Samuel, you know that reporter in Eldridge, the one who broke the mill scandal last year?" Samuel nodded, a faint smile cracking his grizzled features. "Yeah, honest sort. Owes me for stitching up his brother after a bar scrap. I'll ride out, drop the recordings anonymous. Let the light do the work." As the plan took shape, Lily pushed through the door, her small hand tugging Ethan's vest, the fabric bunching under her fingers. Clara knelt beside her, but the girl's eyes stayed on him, wide and unblinking. "The bad men coming back?" she asked, voice threading the air with innocent dread, the stuffed bear dangling from her other hand like a shield. Ethan crouched, the porch dust gritting against his knees, bringing his face level with hers. The sun haloed her curls, turning them to gold, and in that light the resemblance hit anew. Not just features, but the spark of defiance mirroring his own buried fire. "Not if we stand together," he said, tapping her chest gently, mirroring her first touch at the gas station. "You're part of the promise now. All of us." The moment shattered with the wail of sirens in the distance, faint at first, then swelling like an approaching storm. Dust rose on the main street, a patrol car cresting the rise, its lights flashing erratic against the blue sky. The sheriff, a paunchy man named Harlan, no relation but irony's cruel joke, stepped out, badge glinting like false gold, flanked by two deputies whose eyes darted uneasy. "Harlan," Ethan greeted, rising slow, his crew forming a loose semicircle, engines still warm in the lot behind them. No aggression, just presence, a wall of leather and resolve that spoke louder than shouts. The sheriff's gaze flicked over them, sweat beading on his brow despite the dry heat, the weight of syndicate strings pulling taut. "Got a call," Harlan muttered, adjusting his hat, the brim casting a shadow over eyes that avoided direct contact. "Disturbance at the mill, reports of trespassing, assault. You boys know anything?" His voice carried the rehearsed lilt of a man reciting someone else's lines, corruption's polish dulling the edges of duty. Clara stepped forward, Lily half hidden behind her legs, her chin lifting in that unyielding way. "We know plenty," she said, voice clear as river water. "Men in suits dragging me from my home, using my daughter as leverage. That's your disturbance." The deputies shifted, discomfort rippling through them, but Harlan pressed on, hand hovering near his radio. "Evidence says otherwise. Syndicate claims harassment. Hand it over, and we sort this quiet." Ethan's blood thrummed, the ethical knife twisting. Surrender the proof, and the vipers walked free, their rot festering unchecked, fight and risk painting the crew as the villains. Badges turning on brothers who'd sworn to protect, but loyalty's compass held true, pointing to the higher ground. "Sort it quiet," he echoed, stepping closer, the scent of hot asphalt rising between them. "Like how you ignored the trailer park raids, the debts that crush families while you look away." The sheriff flinched, the accusation landing like a boot on gravel, cracks forming in his facade. Jax slipped the recorder from his pocket, holding it up, not threatening but offering. "Listen to this. Then decide whose side justice stands on." The device played, Clara's captured pleas mingling with the scarred man's threats, the ledger's cold numbers underscoring the extortion's web. Harlan's face paled, the deputies exchanging glances, the siren's echo fading into the wind, silence stretched, taut as a bowstring, the sun dipping lower, painting the street in amber warnings. Finally the sheriff sagged, radio crackling unanswered. "Damn it all," he whispered, rubbing his neck. "Syndicate's been leaning hard, but this changes things." No dramatic turnaround, just the quiet erosion of fear by truth. A man's conscience stirring beneath the bought-off layers. He waved off the deputies, turning back to his car. "I'll stall 'em, get that to the press, but watch your backs, these snakes bite when cornered." As the patrol retreated, dust settling in its wake, the crew exhaled collective breath, the porch reclaiming its fragile peace. Clara pulled Lily close, her hand finding Ethan's in a brief, wordless clasp, gratitude, alliance, the mending of old fractures. Inside, voices rose again, plans shifting to safeguards, rotating watches, back road escapes if needed. Samuel mounted up, the engine's roar a farewell as he headed for Eldridge, the recorder his cargo of reckoning. Ethan watched him go, the horizon swallowing his taillight, feeling the promise's thread pull tighter. Redemption not in grand gestures, but in these small stands, honor's legacy weaving through the chosen family like unbreakable chain. Lily tugged his hand once more, her whisper cutting the fading heat. "We won today?" Ethan knelt, the world narrowing to her trusting gaze. "One battle, kid, but the ride's just starting." The sun slipped toward evening, shadows lengthening like promises yet to unfold. The Iron Promise crew standing firm against the encroaching dusk. Corruption's remnants stirred, but in Blackridge's heart, loyalty burned brighter, a beacon guiding them through the moral tempests ahead. The evening shadows stretched long across Blackridge's main street, the sun dipping behind the jagged hills like a weary sentinel handing off the watch. The air cooled slowly, carrying the faint, earthy scent of creosote bushes awakening in the dusk. Mingling with the lingering tang of exhaust from the bikes lined up like silent guardians outside the Rusty Spur saloon, Ethan stood on the porch, his arms crossed over the worn leather of his vest, the forged chain emblem catching the last glints of light, a symbol of bonds that time couldn't rust. Inside, the murmur of voices had softened to a steady hum, the crew settling into chairs with plates of Maria's hearty stew, steam rising like offerings to the trials they'd weathered. Lily's laughter bubbled occasionally, a clear note piercing the weight of the day as she perched on Clara's lap, tracing patterns in the condensation on a glass of milk. Clara met Ethan's gaze through the screen door, her expression a mosaic of exhaustion and quiet strength, the locket nestled against her collarbone like a sealed vow. The confrontation with the sheriff had been a pivot, his reluctant nod to the truth cracking the syndicate's hold just enough. Harlan had driven off with promises to buy time, rerouting patrols, feeding false leads to the Viper's informants. But Ethan knew fragile truces in these badlands. Corruption didn't surrender easy. It coiled and struck from the underbrush. Yet in that fragile window, Samuel's ride to Eldridge carried hope, the recorder's damning words en route to ears that could amplify them into a roar. Jax joined him on the porch, nursing a mug of black coffee, the steam curling around his beard like morning mist. "Reporter's solid. Says it'll hit the wires by morning. Photos of the mill, Clara's statement, the ledgers. Syndicate's house of cards starts tumbling then." His voice was low, threaded with the satisfaction of justice uncoiling, not through fists but the slow, inexorable grind of exposure. Tyler leaned against a post nearby, sharpening a pocket knife with rhythmic scrapes, his eyes scanning the empty street, where dust still danced in eddies. "Heard from a contact. Scarred ones already squirming, calling in favors, but with the sheriff flipping, their badges won't shield them." Samuel's absence loomed large, but the crew's network hummed beneath it all. Veterans' ties, old war buddies in newsrooms and precincts untouched by the rot, a web of loyalty stronger than any syndicate scheme. Ethan nodded, the knot in his chest easing fractionally, but his thoughts drifted inward. To the gas station's peeling wall, Lily's tiny hand tapping his chest, unearthing the promise he'd let the roads swallow. 15 years of solo miles, chasing horizons to outpace the ache of what he'd left behind. Clara's desperate plea in the rain, the weight of a child unspoken. Now, with Lily's trust woven into his days and Clara's presence a bridge across the chasm, redemption felt less like absolution and more like arrival, a quiet docking after endless drift. "It's not just about them falling," he said, voice gravelly as the cooling gravel underfoot. "It's us standing. Family doesn't break when the shadows hit. It holds the line." The screen door creaked open, and Lily slipped out, her bare feet padding soft against the boards, the stuffed bear trailing behind like a faithful shadow. Clara followed, her hand on the girl's shoulder, the two of them a unit forged anew in the mill's dim light. Lily looked up at Ethan, her eyes reflecting the fading sky's purples and golds, that stubborn jaw set with the same resolve he'd seen in her mother. "Uncle Jack says the bad men are scared now, like monsters under the bed when you turn on the light." She tilted her head, small fingers twisting the bear's ear. "You turned it on, didn't you?" Ethan knelt, the porch wood groaning in sympathy, bringing his world down to hers. The scent of stew and soap clung to her, a simple innocence that pierced deeper than any blade. "Yeah, kiddo, lights chase monsters every time, but it's the people holding the switch that make the difference." Clara smiled faintly, a rare softness breaking through her guarded edges, and she placed a hand on his shoulder. The touch light but loaded, mending threads pulled taut by years apart. No grand declarations, just the unspoken understanding of paths reconverged, promises kept not in perfection, but persistence. Night fell fully then, stars pricking the velvet sky like distant campfires, the saloon's windows glowing warm against the dark. Maria dimmed the lights inside, herding the crew toward rest, spare rooms above the bar, cots in the back for the overflow. The rumble of an approaching engine cut the quiet, headlights sweeping the lot before Samuel dismounted, his face flushed from the wind-whipped ride. He clutched a satchel, nodding grimly as he approached. "It's done. Reporters running it front page, syndicate links to half the county's dirty deals, names dropped like stones in a pond." Sheriff called ahead. He's cutting ties, turning over what he knows to feds untouched by the mess. The words rippled through the group like a released breath, the weight of the day lifting into something lighter. Victory not flashy, but profound, justice's quiet poetry unfolding. The scarred man's empire began unraveling that night. Arrests in the pre-dawn hours, black sedans towed from back alleys, ledgers seized as threads unraveled the web. Whispers spread through Blackridge like dawn's first light, families breathing easier, debts forgiven in the glare of exposure, the Viper's polished threats exposed as hollow bluster. Ethan watched from the porch as the crew toasted with mugs raised high, the clink of ceramic echoing their unbreakable chain. Clara joined him, Lily dozing against her side, the three of them a tableau of reclaimed wholeness under the starlit canopy. In the quiet hours, as the town settled into sleep, Ethan felt the scars of his past shift, not erased, but integrated, part of the man who'd answered a child's whisper with action. The iron promise rode on, guardians of the overlooked, their legacy etched in lives like lilies, touched by loss, lifted by loyalty. The road stretched infinite ahead, but now it carried them together, family chosen in the forge of honor, redemption's engine humming steady into the unknown. Dawn broke clear and unyielding, painting the Badlands in hues of rose and gold, the horizon promising open miles, free of immediate shadows. Ethan fired up his Harley, the engine's familiar growl a benediction. Clara and Lily settled behind him, small hands clutching vest patches, a new rhythm syncing with the throttle. The crew formed up, jacks at his flank, engines harmonizing in a chorus of departure. Blackridge receded in the rear view, the rusty spur a beacon left warmer for their passage, Maria waving from the steps with a nod of quiet pride. They rode toward whatever called next, a fresh start in a border town Clara knew, roots to plant away from the syndicate's fading echo. No loose ends dangled. The truth had sealed them, justice's moral arc bending toward light. Ethan's heart, once a wanderer's drum, beat now with purpose's steady pulse, the promise fulfilled, not as endpoint, but legacy, weaving through the chosen kin like an endless chain. Thank you for riding this journey of promises kept and bonds unbreakable. If these tales of redemption touch your road, subscribe and join the crew. We've got more horizons to chase together.